fuel choice that even rivals can agree on? Now that's worth the hype. Cheaper, cleaner, and homegrown. Pump it up with unleaded 88.
If you grill it, he will come.
Hey.
Is this heaven?
Nope. It's fairway.
Scott Dochterman. Chad Leistikow. Together on one pod, talking odds and all things Big Ten. Powered by GameDay Men's Health, with locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, and North Liberty. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Legends and Listeners. Exclusively on Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. It is a Cy-Hawk edition of Legends and Listeners here on the Iowa Everywhere Network. I am Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register, joined by the athletic Scott Dochterman. As always, episode 57 coming to you on this Thursday morning from the Channel Seed Studios. And Scott, I think we've got everyone covered. You were in Ames on Tuesday. You did the CW pod here on Iowa Everywhere with Chris Williams. I was in Iowa City as always. Tried to ask a few extra questions for you while I was at it. This is going to be a really fun matchup to break down, and we'll try to do that over the next hour.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Chad.
I know it feels like we're both, well, especially you, are like radio guests, aholics this week. So yeah, it does feel like we're having each other on.
Yeah, right. No, it's been a busy week, frankly. I was in Minneapolis last Thursday night, and then got back, and then Iowa's game, and then I was in Ames on Tuesday for this. Just wanted to get a little different perspective on this series, and I think it's important. And here we are, and maybe tomorrow things slow down a little bit. We got some NFL games Thursday and Friday, and then we've got this matchup as always on Saturday.
Cy-Hawk Week's usually one of my least favorite of the year, just because of the angst, especially where I live. How does it? I don't know. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I've been better about laying off social media and quit being a jerk on certain things, or just poking around. I mean, making jokes, and then it turns into this thing. And today I almost stepped into it with Nebraska and Colorado, a Twitter poll I did. Which one are you rooting for, Iowa fans, Nebraska or Dion? And the Nebraska fans are like, "Well, what are you doing that for?" And so I'm like, just lighten up, Francis. So. No, I'm kind of the same way, just because there is a lot of angst. I know where you live in the middle part of the state. It's Cy-Hawk like every day anyway. So dealing with this week and the angst and can be challenging. But you lived over here. It's a big, gigantic week. I'm not diminishing one iota of it in Eastern Iowa. But once the week is over, the page is turned and it kind of goes to the next step. And I know if you're living in Des Moines, Ankeny, West Des Moines, whatever, and you got to go to church on that Sunday, or you got to go to the office on that Monday, or school, or whatever, or volleyball match on Tuesday, you're going to see somebody. And when your team loses, I know how horrible it can feel. So.
Well, as we get going, Scott, we're going to look at 5 matchups that we feel like will decide this game, and then we'll decide kind of who we think has the advantage in those areas. We picked them together, so I think it'll be a good list for you guys. But first, let's look at a few big picture things about the matchup itself. Obviously, Iowa coming off a road win a year ago, returning to Kinnick, where they lost 2 years ago. Interestingly, Scott, 9 of the last 11 meetings have been won by the road team. But from Iowa State's perspective, you were over there on Tuesday. I guess, what do you feel like is at stake?
At stake for Iowa State or Iowa or both?
Iowa State. Start with Iowa State.
Okay. I think this is an important game for Iowa State. Obviously, I mean it's a rivalry game. There are no contiguous Big 12 teams on Iowa State's border, so I think Kansas State and Iowa State's a terrific rivalry, but I don't think that it's hard for them. This is a big one, and Iowa's lucky that it does have more than just one kind of rival. But at the same time, this is not their season. And right now, where they are kind of stuck in some areas where they didn't run the ball very well, they didn't defend the run very well, and they're injured in the second level. I think that if this isn't the game to put all the chips in the middle of the table, let's put it that way. It's like grit through it, win it if you can, but live to fight another day if you must. Because there's going to be a lot of days, and Iowa State under Matt Campbell has done a really good job of bouncing back from this, usually a defeat. And I'm not, I think that Iowa's going to win this game, but I don't. They do a much better job looking at the big picture and keeping it day by day rather than just, sometimes in the past it felt like Iowa State put everything in the middle of the table on this and they won, and then what happened next? It wasn't real pretty.
Yeah, I definitely feel like circumstances have changed from just a month ago, Scott. I went over this on our Hawk Central show on Wednesday as well. And to me, three main things have changed that have turned my opinion towards the Hawkeyes. We'll get into it as we go here. But I think the Kirk Ferentz emotional factor is one. I think the injury factor that you referenced, Caleb Bacon in particular being injured, the best. Just think if Jay Higgins got hurt for the week before the Iowa State game. I mean, I remember back in I'm going to sound like Kirk Ferentz here, but I'm only going back to 2019 when Christian Welch got hurt against Penn State. No offense to Dylan Doyle, who came in, but the game changed when Iowa lost its middle linebacker, and that was a really tense game in that 2019 season. Iowa loses at 17-12. Just as an example, when you lose a key player like that, a kind of a heart and soul type of guy, it is a big deal. So that changes my perspective, and also the quarterback play for Iowa. We don't spend a lot of time rehashing previous week's games, Scott, on our show because we air on Thursdays. But Cade McNamara has been the biggest development since we last spoke last Thursday before you headed to row the boat up in Minneapolis. So I think the quarterback is I'm not saying it's solved, but I'm saying those three things to me have all gone in Iowa's favor for this particular matchup.
For sure. And you can't, and it's weird because I wouldn't say we have PTSD or anything like that, but there have been so many times when Iowa State has won where it's looked like it swung in Iowa's favor, but that's also dating ourselves a little bit. That's when we're talking about 2007. Well, that was 17 years ago. So, I mean, that's what our old dude memories start locking up here. But I think that with what you mentioned with Cade McNamara, the way he was able to play mid-second quarter on, and certainly in the third and fourth quarters, was a revelation for Iowa in a lot of ways. Now, we also take that with the grain of salt, which is who are you playing against and what happened out of that. Okay, but I think just to get a positive development out of this offense, which we haven't had for years, and to have it look the way it did, it looked like, hey, they're doing something, and they're doing something good. And he's 13 of 14, and the only incompletion was a drop. And they're running the ball with effectiveness. They average, 6 yards a carry, but after halftime, it was like 9 yards a carry. So, when they're playing like that, you're thinking, okay, positive things. Can that continue? Is it false positivity? I don't think so. Now, we're nobody in their right mind is suggesting it's going to be exactly the same this week. But feeling like you did it, okay, we feel good about ourselves. We performed it a way that we wanted to. That is really important for Iowa based on what we've seen, because the defense is going to bring it like they always do. But for the offense to match that, it's true complementary football. And if you can play like that, very few teams in this country will beat them.
So you said, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I can't even remember now, but playoffs or bust for the Hawkeyes. Okay. So swinging it over into Iowa's point of view here, Scott. And this touches on something I wrote earlier this week for the Des Moines Register. I feel like this is almost, I'm not saying it is, almost a playoff elimination game for Iowa. And the reason I say that is because everything we talked about, I think with the schedule last week, like if you lose this game, especially now that you're getting a few breaks in your favor, I would say. I mean, the injury part does, you have to have a little bit of injury luck along the way. So far, Iowa is extremely healthy. Cade McNamara on Tuesday, just kind of giddy that he didn't even have to go to the trainer's room on Sunday. I mean, that's a huge stab. Think about the quad he was dealing with last year versus what Iowa State's dealing with and with the linebackers. I think you and Chris were talking about it. They're down 3 or 4 linebackers, right? I mean, at least 3. So including their best one. So imagine if I was out without Higgins, Jackson, and Fisher. you know, right. I mean, it's different. It's different. So if Iowa loses this, still only a 2.5, 3-point favorite. Very possible they lose. Almost got to beat Ohio State to get in the playoff. And I know that sounds dramatic, but 10-2 is going to put them in that's not a great position to be in. And that's the best case if you don't beat Ohio State then after this. And as an example, Scott, and I love your perspective on this because I could be wrong. But as an example, we saw USC beat LSU Sunday night, okay? And as I wrote in my column, yeah, great for the Big Ten, woohoo. But maybe not great for Iowa if you think about it, because what if USC goes 10-2 and there's one Big Ten spot left and they beat LSU and they beat, take your pick, Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan, any of those 3.
Yeah. Okay,
and they lost the other 2, won the rest, 10-2. Who's 10-2 are they going to take? I mean, pretty obvious, right? I mean, unless teams don't pan out what we think they're possibly going to be. But then what's Iowa's best win? We'll find out. Maybe it's like a Nebraska. Maybe it's a Wisconsin. I don't know. But I just think you just can't lose a game like this. Plus, you get a head-to-head conference matchup. That's a huge factor when it comes down to it for not only you but your conference to have a Big Ten win over a Big 12 here. So I think there's a lot of factors that this is a huge playoff implication game for Iowa because that is their goal, to make the playoffs.
That's my story for Thursday, is that this is bigger than it's ever been because of the implications for both conferences and these teams on the playoff. And it's not just Iowa and Iowa State, which is what we're talking about now, but what happens if it's, let's say Nebraska has a great year and they're 10-2 and Kansas State's 10-2 and both of them win the final weekend against Iowa and Iowa State, and you're looking head to head. Well, how this game panned out is kind of how, okay, so if Iowa State comes to Iowa City and wins, and they're both 8-4 at the end of the year, and Kansas State is, just won at Ames by a field goal and Nebraska wins by a field goal at Iowa City, it's like, well, that's a data point that matters in this head-to-head. So this is why this is such an important game in the big scheme. And this is what I love about college football now with the playoff, which is games like this matter. Now, I asked Matt Campbell about it, and he's like, I really don't want to get too global right now because we are just in the second game of the season, and we've got a lot of the season left to play for. That is totally understandable. I completely get it. But how you perform in these head-to-head matchups in major conference games matter. Last week I wrote a little bit about that with North Carolina and Minnesota, that Minnesota misses a field goal in the last play of the game, and they're the only Big Ten team to lose. But again, when you start to stack up data points, that's a data point. And so that really matters here with this. And I think to your point, specifically to Iowa losing, you're at home. That's a worse loss than on the road. I mean, if it's the other way around, you look at the injuries to Iowa State. If you were to lose and then hope for the playoffs, you got to go run the gauntlet and go win at the Death Star. Or, even if you don't, you got to wish your in-state rival to go have great success. I mean, it helps you anyway, but you really don't want to go, man, I got to root for the Cyclones too, because then if you're 10-2 and they win the Big 12, then you can say, well, okay, but we lost to the Big 12 champ. You just don't want to put yourself in that position this time of year. And I think this game is much more important to Iowa because of that. Because I think you look at the Big 12 and you look at Iowa State and you think Iowa State traditionally gets better as the year goes on, has a league that it can compete in and potentially run the race. Iowa loses this game. You're in the Big Ten. You're not betting on Iowa to win the Big Ten. Let's put it that way. So that's why I think this game is so important for Iowa.
Well put. Thanks as always to our presenting sponsor of Legends and Listeners, GameDay Men's Health. My people here in West Des Moines reached out to me, said, hey, we're going to be open 8 o'clock to 11 a.m. on Labor Day. That was a huge gift. That was awesome. I was able to get in there. It was super convenient on a holiday, no traffic. It's just they work with you. They make it easy, make it quick, make it simple. And, if you're out there, men, imagine the rush of testosterone you had in your 20s. GameDay Men's Health can help bring back that testosterone with testosterone replacement therapy. Love hearing the banter on two guys named Chris when they're talking about low T and giving each other, especially when Hassel's throwing at Chris Williams. But it is no laughing matter because if you don't have it, and if you do have it, I should say, it can help your mood, your energy, your sex drive, your athletic performance, also help you with other men's health issues, including weight loss. Get your free private, no obligation consultation today, either at the Ankeny, West Des Moines, or North Liberty locations, GameDayMen'sHealth.com. And always tell them you're there because you listen to Chad and Scott on Legends and Listeners.
Yep, you just have to go in the back door at the one in North Liberty because of the van or whatever that drove through the front door. But it's very safe. It's still a great location, and the people there I can't say enough good things about Cody and the like there. All the nurses and the doctors there. So it's certainly a place that I think every man, us old dudes, we should definitely check out because it's been very helpful.
Yeah, they should just call it the Old Dudes Health Clinic.
Yeah,
old dudes made young again. Let's dive into 5 matchups for this Cyhawk game because we don't do this for every game. Like, we're not probably going to do this for the Troy game. We're probably not going to do this for, I don't know, Northwestern maybe, but Iowa State it's like, I feel like the last several times, like how far do you go back? At least to 19, maybe 18, maybe 17. Like the spread has been tight. The spread, and so these matchups are they come down to one thing or another. And so we've picked 5 things, Scott, that we're going to talk about. And 5 categories. You figure you're going to pick Iowa or Iowa State in an odd number. So should have a winner after all that, right? You pointed out in our email, which we should just sort of preface by saying that we both agree that turnovers is the number one factor.
No question.
In whether either of these teams win ball games. Iowa can't go -3 and expect to win. Iowa State, people ask me all the time, why is Iowa beating Iowa State? It's almost every time it's been because of turnovers, and
yes.
Iowa has not turned the ball over in this series, hardly at all. The only turnover last year was when Nico Regaini got dragged down on a pass interference call. What was it? Like 6 straight years they hadn't committed a turnover in the Cyhawk game. I mean, that's been a huge key to Iowa's success. So,
yeah, Iowa since 2015, Iowa is +9 in this series.
There you go.
And the only time that Iowa State won was 0, and that was in 2022. Each team had 3, and neither team looked the part of being anything more than cannon fodder for the season that day on offense anyway. But when you look back, I mean, the only time since 2007 that Iowa's been in the minus column was in 14. And of course they lost by a last second field goal that day against a team that won 2 games. So that tells you just how razor thin this is and how it could switch. I mean, the biggest game going into it that we've seen was the 21 game when they're both in the top 10. College Game Day was there. It's +4 for Iowa.
Right.
They won by 10. That matters. So turnovers in this really matters. And Iowa's wins under Kirk Ferentz against Iowa State, they're +16. And their losses, or Iowa State's wins against Kirk Ferentz, Iowa's -2. So turnovers really impact this game, but Iowa State has to, just straddle that line of be aggressive, but don't be stupid. And I think, in Iowa's case, they've done a really nice job of holding the ball, but they've got to also be a little more aggressive at times.
So turnovers aren't a matchup, but we just wanted to say that's the number one key. And it pretty much is most games, but especially in this game for the numbers you just mentioned. All right, number one, Scott, on our matchup. And I think this is probably top of mind for me, especially as I was asking questions the other day of Iowa's defensive backs. Xavier Wampa was there. Quinn Schulte was there. TJ Hall was there on Tuesday. Jalen Knoll and Jaden Higgins versus Iowa secondary, particularly Jamari Harris, who did not play in last year's game because he was suspended, and TJ Hall, who also did not play. Maybe he played special teams, but he did not. Deshaun Lee was the other corner last year, along with Cooper DeJean. So what do you make of this matchup, Scott?
This is a challenging matchup for Iowa. And the reason why is those are two NFL receivers in different ways. Jalen Knoll and Jaden Higgins. Higgins is a little taller, very athletic. He's legit. And Knoll is a little smaller, but also – can move with the ball. I think they present challenges for Iowa, and of course Iowa's not going to just defend them man coverage, except on probably goal line if they have those types of situations. But that said, they're going to have to defend them in space, and these guys are very capable of creating their shot, breaking them off the dribble, throw some basketball metaphors in there, but you throw some sort of swing pass to Jalen Knoll, he can go from 7 to 11 yards. When you look at Jaden Higgins, I think back, there was one big play they really allowed defensively last week, and it was that long pass on John Nestor. And I'm not saying John Nestor is going to be in there, but that was kind of like hey, this stuff can happen, and they're going to test it. They're going to try. And I think that's something that this is a matchup that I think Iowa needs to be as close to net even in if it wants to win decisively, let's say, because this is an advantage to me for the Cyclones.
Yeah, I think this is probably the number one strength that, as I see it, of Iowa State. I think this is their biggest advantage. And so I'm really curious to see how much they attack it, because Phil Parker, as we know, Scott, having studied him and been in his defensive sessions even, he wants to make quarterbacks make the tough throws to the outside in particular. And these are two guys, and we saw against North Dakota. First play of the season, long pass downfield, complete. Second pass, touchdown.
Right.
So they showed right there they're willing to attack, but we've seen that work against teams that try that against Iowa too. I think back to 2018 up in Minnesota, Scott. Iowa had two freshman cornerbacks that day, Riley Moss and Juju Brents, and Minnesota tested them with some great receivers, and those tests did not work out so well. Those guys combined for 3 picks. Iowa trains these guys pretty well. And, TJ Hall, no career interceptions. Wouldn't be surprised if, we're writing about him on Saturday. But he had a strong camp. We don't, but who knows? I would still give the advantage to Iowa State. But it's a fascinating matchup to watch. And, hey, how about Xavier Wampa? Does he, make a play, undercut a crossing route? With his speed and his close, he hasn't had a pick since the first game last year. He's on a bit of a drought. I know he had one club last year, but still, it's advantage Iowa State for me, but opportunity for Iowa.
Well, this is what I also look at is, if we isolate these two receivers on these two corners, it's an advantage for Iowa State. If you decide, well, we're going to throw the entire Iowa secondary into this conversation with Sebastian Castro, with Quinn Schulte, with Xavier Wampa, then it becomes net even easily, because if not advantage a little bit to Iowa, because they are in a tremendous secondary as a whole, and I'm not disparaging Jermari Harris or TJ Hall by any stretch. I just think that those players, you give them their respect, that they are two of the better receivers, two of the better receiver tandems in the country, and they are an explosive duo. We saw that last week. They're very capable of doing that, and they're very capable of making catches, contested catches, but also catches that, from 5 yards and turn them into 11 and things like that really add up. And I think in this situation, though, what Iowa State has to do, and I don't know if it's prepared to do it, and I don't know if Becht is prepared or these guys are prepared for, but they are, this is their punch. This is the way to win, is to try to beat Iowa in space. And Iowa's secondary with it, always running too high safety, two gap up front. There's always a place on the field that's unguarded or that's lightly guarded. They've got to find it. They got to take advantage of it, but it's something that's usually small, and it's something that you have to go up the field on. And so Iowa State's going to have to be patient with that. But this is Iowa State's best punch, no question, is that these receivers. And Eli Green is really good too, by the way. He got a transfer from North Dakota State, and
Iowa wanted him.
Yeah, and let's not forget about Ben Bramer, who might be one of the better young tight ends in the country.
Yeah, let me throw it back at you before we move on to number 2, and just ask you this. You say, take your shots or whatever with Iowa State, and in general, I do concur with that. I know Chris Williams on your pod was concurring with that as well. Could Iowa State deploy the Penn State game plan from last year against Iowa, where Drew Aller was, I believe that Rocco Becht's a very accurate passer. His percentages are very good, where you're completing those, whatever Iowa gives you, just complete them and take it. Take those 5 yards, take those 6 yards, and just chip away. We knew that we know how that time of possession played out. Could that be an alternative strategy to use those guys to your advantage? Because Iowa will give you those, they'll give you 4 yards. They'll give you 5 yards on a pass. I don't know.
It's a strategy that would work, but I don't think they have the personnel to pull it off the way Penn State did. They don't have the first round NFL left tackle. Mm-hmm. They don't have 2 running backs that are going into the NFL. Becht and Aller. I mean, Aller's a little bit better quarterback, but not much better. I think he's capable of that. I think these receivers are capable of that. However, is the offensive line capable of stonewalling Iowa as often as they did? And are they capable of running the football, which I know we'll talk about too? I think then it just becomes a pass game. I think they are capable of dinking, dunking, and moving their way down the field. They're just going to have to be really patient with that. They're going to have to think like Iowa and be aggressive like Iowa State, which is there's no sin in punting. Don't do anything stupid. Be risk averse. Take your shots when they're there. We'll move on to the next possession. We'll be fine. But be more aggressive through the air, because that's their one way. I mean, the other way, which we'll talk about, they're not capable of beating Iowa.
Good analysis there. Number 2, Scott, on our list of 5 matchups for the Iowa State game was one you had listed, and it's Cade McNamara versus the Iowa State pass rush. And this kind of dovetails into another topic that I know is on your mind, which is third down conversions. Cade did a good job in the second half of that. That is not has not been a strength of his until the second half of the last game. So how do you see that? And then I'll weigh in after that.
One thing that concerns me about Iowa State's defense after watching it the other day. And I feel like in some ways I'm nitpicking, but I don't know how many dudes they have up front. I don't know if I see a Will McDonald. I don't know that I see a Mazarike, anybody like that on their defensive line. Now I think, an item, an item Tyler O, we'll call him. And I think J.R. Singleton are okay. And I think Tyler O especially is pretty good. But are they going to be able to get to Cade McNamara with any kind of regularity? I don't know. And that's something that I want to see it before I believe it, because I just don't know that they have that pass rusher that they have had in the past. Maybe they do, and maybe I'll be surprised, but I'm just kind of concerned there. Now, if you want to talk third downs, Chad, let's do it. This is the stat of the game. Who can convert on third down with more regularity? Because if we look at the flip side, the what could happen negatively to Iowa column, it's 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. You keep going, and then all of a sudden you're playing punt ball. And we know that the fans are excited after the second half of last week, but they're also got short-term memory here.
Yeah.
So you do that for your first 4 possessions, and then maybe there's a turnover, and then you get it, you get it on the plus side and 3 and out again, then that's going to create a problem. Whereas, Iowa State 2 years ago when they won, they converted 1 drive. It was a great drive, 99 yards.
Yeah.
But, that was 1 drive, and that's all they needed. And I think if Iowa State, conversely, can do what we always talked about with Iowa last year, which is, hey, you get the ball at the 25, you get 3 first downs, get it to midfield, and you've got a punt. No sin in that. Make Iowa go 90 yards. And so that's why I think third down percentage is a bigger stat than it normally would be in a game like this.
Well, Iowa had overall a good third down game the other day, and one of the things I really liked about what they did, Scott, was they spread it out 5 wide a couple times, and it worked. Brian Ferentz did that too sometimes, but it would sometimes be 3 tight ends and 2 receivers,
Yeah.
But it did work. And obviously having a healthy Luke Lachey helped. He hit Jacob Gill a couple times on third down completions, twice on really tough catches that Jacob Gill made nice plays on. And obviously the emergence of Reese Vanderzee, was, if not the biggest story, it was the second biggest story of the offense on Saturday. And so all those factors give me more confidence about Iowa on third down. And I think the thing that maybe at least should give Iowa fans a little bit of hope, Scott, is, during the Tim Lester podcast that I had, we did talk a lot about third downs. And that has been a strength of Tim Lester's, where in the places he has been. If you look at his Western Michigan stats, if you look at his even his Syracuse stats, that number went up a lot. And he talked about having their national rankings. They were about as bad as you can get in third down the last 2 years, 127th, I think, or maybe it was 129.
Mm-hmm.
I think it might have been 129. And they, if they can go from like 27% to 42% this year, or 44% even, something like that, man, that would be huge. And so, I don't know. It scares me from Iowa's perspective that Cade could commit some turnovers in these situations against the pass rush, because he almost had 2 last week. One got tipped high in the air. The other was a jump ball that Reese Vanderzee turned into a touchdown. We've seen Iowa quarterbacks all last year had him and Deacon Hill had trouble keeping control of the football. So it does worry me a little bit, but I would say overall I feel pretty good about the poise that Cade has and the Tim Lester. I think he's got something on third down right now.
I like what they did, no question, the other day. Right now, what I found most fascinating was in going through personnel groupings, almost 67% of them, 2/3 were in 12 personnel, straight up 12. And then in fact, only 19 plays were in 11 personnel, out of 71. So they were going heavy 2 tight ends. And that's because, why wouldn't you? you have 2 NFL guys. I think Ostrenga is going to get there, and Lachey could be there right now if he wanted to be. And I think that's something I found fascinating. But on third down, who's your third down guys? Usually they're taller, bigger targets or guys who can make people miss in space. They didn't really have their miss space guy. They did have guys who made tough catches. I thought Jacob Gill had a couple of really tough ones. I think Reese Vanderzee twice had slants over the middle that were really impactful. As you said, you had the Cade McNamara throwing off his back foot and luckily got a touchdown in the end zone. This is probably one where Tim Lester is going, great job. Don't ever do it again, unless it's the end of the half or something, it's just, you don't do that stuff. It gets, against decent defensive backs and stuff. So anyway, overall, I think that this is a situation where if they're efficient on third down and they prove they can do that and mix things up, then yes, I think that's really cool. And then the other part is, Chad, I charted all the motion on the rewatch and the trades. I divided them. Trades are like when the tight end kind of, way before the snap kind of moves over from right to left or left to right and then gets positioned. And then your motions are, at the snap, sometimes jet sweep, sometimes otherwise. And they never did a trade and jet motion or trade and motion, which you do sometimes in these offenses. So I'm like, okay, that's coming this week. And, and there wasn't much double motion, and of course they can't move at the same time, but there wasn't a lot of extra movements. And I thought, okay, they're holding that back too. So I'm anxious to see what Tim Lester is going to do here with that, because that to me is going to be really fascinating.
That's so funny because I had that later in the show because it was a question for my text group is what did Iowa hold back, Scott? What else might we see this week? And the number one thing that popped into my head was the jet sweeps, because we know that is that's part of what he showed a little bit in the spring game Kids Day. And he only ran one this past week to get to Jacob Gill. And now you get Caleb Brown back.
Yeah.
And Caden Weechin was ill last game, part of the game, so he didn't get as many snaps, and I think he's a jet sweep guy too. So, so to me, all that, and then to finish the third down conversation, I like Cade on scrambles right now. I mean, it's a small sample size, but even Kids Day, that was the one thing he did well on Kids Day.
Yeah.
And then, he had three really nice scrambles. One for a run, one that got the pass to Zach Ortworth,
right?
And then the other that didn't count.
Yeah. Thanks, Luke Lachey.
Yeah.
He ate it after that. He felt so bad,
Yeah.
And he's the nicest guy. If we had a ranking of nice guys that we've ever covered, Luke Lachey is at or near the top of the list. I mean, he and Megan Gustafson to me are like the nicest people we've ever covered.
Seriously, yeah. Great call there. And Cade wasn't sacked. I mean, so credit to him for, again, when we talk about Iowa State's pass rush versus Cade, I'm going to give advantage Cade there. All right, number 3, Scott. This is a big one because I know this is a question. Iowa State's offensive line against Iowa's front 7, because, I mean, do we think Iowa State has to have some semblance of a run game to win this game, or can they be one-dimensional? Because that's the thing to me. Can Iowa just neutralize the run completely so that they can make Rocco Beck throw the ball 50 times?
If Iowa State is one-dimensional, Iowa State loses. And that doesn't mean they have to just run the ball like Iowa wants to, run the ball 50 times and pass it 20 or whatever. They have to run to keep Iowa honest, and they have to run in surprise situations. And this is what I'm sure Taylor Mauser has been, keeping himself up late at night and waking up really early and probably in the middle of the night too, thinking about it, because, they ran for 86 yards against North Dakota. That's just not good enough. It's not good enough against the FCS team. And we saw it last year early for Iowa against Utah State, and they just weren't running the ball well enough. And you're like, okay, there's a problem here. And of course it was a gigantic problem. And I think in this situation, Iowa's very much capable of shutting down their running game. So what Iowa State has to do is pass to set up the run only when Iowa's not prepared for it, or just do it to chew clock. Because Chris and I, when we were talking yesterday, one of the worst thing Iowa State could do against Iowa is decide, all right, we're going to try to have to throw to win. And I talked to Gary Danielson today too, who's calling the game, and he's like, that's the only way that that they're going to be able to win is throwing the football. But if you go 3 and out with 3 passes and then punt, and then Iowa has a long drive, and then another 3 and out with 3 passes, you're going to be just brutalized by the end of the game. So Iowa can definitely shut down the run game. It doesn't mean that Iowa State can't win that way. It just means they're going to have to be very strategic in how they do it, and they can't give up. They need to run when they can. And that may be, hey, you get a 9-yard pass on first down. It may mean run on second down. You need to kind of push them off the line of scrimmage and give your defense a rest, because that's where complementary football comes in, and that's where it's a good word, not a bad word.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa is so good at stopping the run with just the 7.
Mm-hmm.
So they can let their secondary. They don't have to bring that 8th guy into the box, that type of thing. They got to do that though. They're going to have to do that. They can't let Abu Sama get 4 or 5 yards a pop. We know that.
Yeah.
But to me, the 2 biggest factors in this whole deal, Scott, are arguably, well, definitely Iowa's 2 best defensive linemen, but certainly 2 of their better players on defense, which is Y.A. Black and Aaron Graves. Both played fantastic openers. I mean, Graves with the 3 sacks. Graves gave all the credit, by the way, to Y.A., who consumed 2 guys every play, so he could make those plays. And so those 2 guys, man, they are just dudes. And I was listening to Ferentz's show last night, and he was very complimentary of both those guys, but they were talking about Graves in particular, and just he started fast at Iowa as a true freshman, but he's really come into his own. Had a great spring, Kirk said, and I mean, we've known he's a big prospect for a long time, and great opener for him. So those 2 guys, I feel like, have the chance, Scott, to control the game from Iowa's perspective, even if Iowa doesn't get a pass rush.
Right. And, this is one of the things I always impress upon people with Iowa's 2-gap scheme. And a lot of times with Y.A. Black kind of running 0 tech or 1 tech, right there and over the center or just to the side of the center. He may not get hardly any statistics, but he may be the best player in the game, because he's occupying space. He's occupying 2 blockers, and he's allowing Jay Higgins to go get 15 tackles, or he's allowing Aaron Graves to go work one-on-one with a guard and get 3 sacks, and then a fumble recovery that for some reason didn't count. I still have my questions about that penalty against Jay Higgins in the secondary. I thought that was a really poor call. But that said, I think that this is where Iowa can dominate, because even without those 2, I thought Brian Allen played well. I like Deontay Black and Ethan Herkett. And, oh, by the way, they have 2 pretty good linebackers, that flank the unit. So this is Iowa's got a lot of beef there. And I don't know that they're going to, have too big of an issue. I think Iowa State has some players that have some experience, but this is one where they know that they're going to be in for a really tough day.
Well, Scott, you are the king of segues here, because speaking of beef, you've got some stuff to say about Fairway. I can tell you before you get started, like every Monday I look at the new Fairway ad, because I live in a town with 1 grocery store, and it's Fairway, and Fairway is awesome. I look to see what's on sale. My wife's like always saying, we got enough stuff in the freezer, but I'm like, yeah, but the chuck roasts are on sale, like I can't not get it. And so anyway, go ahead.
For whatever you're getting this weekend, if for your tailgate, for your watch party, for anything you need, or if you're like me and you're like, you don't want to be around anybody on Sunday because you've been around too many people on Saturday and you just want to grill something yourself, go to Fairway. It's the best place in Iowa. The top of Iowa's sirloin is, to me, the best chunk of meat you'll ever find. I don't even know. I shouldn't even say this, but for the money, you can't get better. You can't go to Joseph's in downtown Iowa City and get a better steak than you can from Fairway to go get a top of Iowa sirloin. And in fact, I want to go have one right now. But so there are Fairways everywhere. There's one, less than half a mile from my house. I love going there. Got great people that work there. I've known them for a long time, and I can't be more impressed with their meat counter. I'll go there 10 out of 10 times if I can versus other grocery stores in the state of Iowa.
Hey, and I'm a sale guy, and they got a Thursday, Friday sale this week. Sirloin steak, Scott, $5.88 for a 10-ouncer. So there you go.
I know where my Friday night's going, man. Go fly, Eagles, fly.
Yeah, there you go. So we got our Bears game on Sunday too to get ready for. So, all right. So far, I think we got two advantage Iowa on 2 of the 3 categories. Yeah. Number 4, Scott, the Iowa offense against Iowa State's young linebackers without Caleb Bacon. Now, on the surface, that might sound like a huge advantage for Iowa, but we saw Iowa struggle, Scott, again with the run for quite a while against Illinois State, and I think one reason that they were able to get out of that was because they got a lot of possessions in the first half. Like they had, I think, 7 possessions in the first half, and that's not normal for Iowa. So the defense got them the ball back several times, is what I'm saying. You might not get that opportunity on Saturday, Scott. You may get 3 possessions in the first half or 4. Mm-hmm. So with that offense that Iowa State has, is what I'm saying. So what do you think? Iowa's offense, can they take advantage of the injury situation, Scott, at linebacker for the Cyclones?
Yeah, they can, but I'm more concerned about what do they do up front against this unit. And the other day, Iowa State performed poorly in stopping the run. I mean, that's really the only way you could explain it. I mean, they gave up a 12-minute drive to North Dakota, 22, 23 plays, whatever it was. And that was not good. I mean, they gave up 174 yards on the ground. And so that is, to me, of all the red flags, all the concerns Iowa State had the other day, that is number 1, 2, and 3, is how do they go against Iowa's veteran offensive line? Now, when we look at what caused Iowa to have some issues in the first half, I would argue that it was a numbers game, kind of the way it was last year. That when you look at last year's situation, Iowa struggled to run the football because they were facing too many guys in the box. And I think Illinois State just felt the same way. Like, all right, well, we're gonna stop the run no matter what. And they sold out for it. Iowa State's going to have to try to do something like that too. It runs a 3-3-5. That's not going to be effective, and that never will be effective against what Iowa does. So they're probably going to try to put in a 4 down most of the situation just to match beef versus beef, top of Iowa sirloin versus top of Iowa sirloin. Then it limits what they need to do with their linebackers. They've got young guys who are very capable. Cooper Ebel is a very good player. Sadowski's also decent. Young, and then, Kale Brazina is very talented, but this is his first career game. He didn't play last week. And Jacob Ellis is decent, but Caleb Bacon was their heartbeat there, and not having him or Will McLaughlin it's critical. I mean, they've got talent, but so to me, it's about, can their front 4 stymie the line enough for Iowa to neutralize it, to make it a net 0. I don't think they can for 4 quarters. They can for a little while. They can in spurts, but I don't think they can for 4 quarters. And then if Iowa's linemen get to the second level, then I think Iowa State's in real trouble.
Check out my piece at hawkcentral.com this morning. I posted, I always do 3 text group questions to preview the game, and one of them was kind of about this. And here's a stat, Scott, that's really interesting. The last 3 meetings, it's pretty ugly. Iowa's averaged 186 yards a game in these 3 meetings. Somehow they've won 2 of them. But 2021, Iowa rushed 39 times for 67 yards. Okay. 2022, Iowa rushed 25 times for 58 yards. And last year, I know you can't take away one long run, but Iowa had 9 first downs last year. Okay, so take away the Jazz Patterson 59-yard burst, which counts. I totally get it, but take that away, and Iowa ran 28 times for 53 yards. And what I'm saying is it's indicative of how difficult it has been for Iowa to run the ball against this 3-3-5 defense. And I know it could be weaker personnel potentially on Iowa State's side. Get that. We think Iowa's offensive line might be better, but that's where I still have concerns. The positive there, Scott, is out of all this is that Caleb Johnson looks like he might be the best running back in a uniform on Saturday, and that counts Abu Sama because Caleb Johnson looked like a dude. Kirk Ferentz said that's the best he's ever seen him run since he's been at Iowa. Holy moly, comes off a first half suspension. And I mean, if they get that guy this year, Scott, then yeah, if they can get that Caleb Johnson again, I absolutely think Iowa can take advantage. But we know Caleb's been kind of up and down. You know, you just never know what you're going to get from him. So got to have good Caleb Johnson.
Yeah, his mind's got to be right. And, you know, there's a reason why he was suspended. And he needs to get his mind right. I mean, just stupid little things that and you look at him and you're like, you're an incredible looking athlete. You've got all this potential, push through, and you could be, you know, in a great league with great running backs, you could still be among the elite, you know, and he proved it for a half, you know, but it was against an FCS team too. Now go do it against a team like this. Now go when it gets hard, be the player that we expect you to be, that we've expected you to be, which is maybe that 3 and 4 yard carries in the first half turn into 7 to 8 in the third quarter. And then boom, there's your 45-yard touchdown. You know, kind of what happened against Illinois last year. I think they're very capable. He's very capable of doing that. You know, what I'm anxious to see is Iowa State didn't do much deviation from his 3-3-5. I think it was just, you know, it really kept 3 safeties back. I don't think that's going to be the case here because I just think that they're going to be worried because Iowa's, if you're Iowa, you just say, you know what, we're going to line up in 12 personnel and we're just going to, you know.
They will line up in 12. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, like I said, 67% of their plays were in 12. And then, well, you know, and then you count the others that had 12 or 13 even, you know, it was the same way. So they're going to have, in my opinion, they're going to have to go 4-2-5. They're going to have to bring up Bo Freiler. He's going to have to play near the line of scrimmage, kind of like a Sebastian Castro, a cash, nickel, something close because he is big, you know, and he's a very good safety. He's one of the best in the country. So that's the way they're going to have to play because they don't have to worry about playing 5 deep. I mean, they're not playing Oklahoma State. They're playing Iowa.
Well, and you think about it, at least the other day, those are the best 11 players on the field was Vanderzee and Gill. And I was impressed with both of them.
Yeah.
But they both block too. Like Kirk Ferentz said that on the show last night. They're both willing blockers, especially Gill. And then you put Ostrenga and Lachey and then Caleb Johnson. Hey, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good starting point. So I totally agree with you. And they just faced that against Illinois State. Illinois State played a 3-man front, but with a 4th guy on the line of scrimmage, essentially. So they at least got used to that this past weekend. I don't know. I don't think Iowa State's quite as exotic with the blitzes. I could be wrong. Illinois State brought Brock Speck had a lot of stuff going on in that game.
Yeah.
So, I think at least Iowa knows what to expect. But Caleb Johnson last year against the Cyclones, 15 carries, 28 yards. So, again, I don't know. I guess I'll give Iowa the edge here. I guess.
I'm giving Iowa the edge. And it's not just because of they've struggled against Iowa State. I'm looking at Iowa State last week.
Right.
They got blown off the ball by North Dakota. To their credit, they only gave up a field goal on that 12-minute drive, and
almost
then
got a turnover.
Yeah, but still, it was like, you're not supposed to. That's not supposed to happen. That you figure sometimes flukes can happen against FCS teams. You know, they catch you on a long pass. Maybe they, you had a bad run fit or something like that. No, you're not supposed to get blown off the ball. And they rolled up like 4 third-down conversions on Iowa State on that drive, and so I think that's an obvious red flag for them. That's why I would go with Iowa. I would probably go with Iowa even if the linebackers were there, because based on that, because I think Iowa's capable again, of running that.
All right, number 5, Scott, is Tim Lester's red zone offense versus Taylor Moser. Is it Mauser or Moser?
Mauser.
Yeah. Mauser's red zone offense. The reason I say that is because, number 1, Tim Lester, that is another point of emphasis for him. Okay. That was the number 1 stat that he improved from 14 to 15 when he was at Syracuse. The 1 year he was the full-time coordinator. He got him from like 87th in the country in red zone offense to 8th. Okay. Because he just said, we just did some different stuff and, kind of made it happen. And so Iowa's got to get 7s, Scott, instead of 3s. Now they maybe could win it like they did in 19 with a bunch of 3s, but that's not an easy path. Okay. No. So that's kind of the point of this conversation. I feel like both offenses, for all the reasons we've outlined, will get red zone opportunities, Scott. Which ones can cash in 7? What do you think?
I don't know. I know that's a bad answer, but it's really, I think they're both, I like what I saw out of Iowa the other day. Luke Lachey, terrific red zone threat. Addison Ostrenga, better one. Reese Vanderzee couldn't have had a better debut and in the red zone. Did great things. Cade McNamara was accurate in the red zone. All those things matter. But then this is an area where they have struggled so much in the last several years. I want to see them run in the red zone. They haven't really done much of that. I guess Caleb Johnson had a 19-yarder touchdown the other day. But and then you look on the other side, they're pretty efficient in the red zone. They've got playmakers. They've got a really good tight end. So I'm kind of at push just because of the uncertainty and also the potential for playmakers. And with Iowa, I'm kind of like, I don't know. I want to see it again. I saw it once. I want to see it again before I can really buy into this.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start at push. We'll see if we can tip it one way or the other here. But something I really liked, and I asked Kate about this Tuesday, was so it's 6-0 early third quarter. Iowa takes its first drive of the third quarter. By the way, how about Iowa deferring without KF?
Yes. Smart thing. Smartest thing.
I think that deferring is the way to go with this team because they've always wanted the ball. But I think with this particular team, your defense put them on the field, and they did that thing that the NFL teams do. Get those kind of last drive of the first half, first drive of the second half type of deal, and they turn that into 10 points. So I like starting the second half with the ball because it seems like it takes Iowa, at least in this game, took Iowa a little bit to kind of get the offense going. And maybe Lester prefers that. Maybe he articulated that. Maybe that's why they did that. I don't know. Where was I going with this? That first drive. So McNamara completes about a maybe 12-yard pass to Lachey, gets down to the 7-yard line. They go hurry up. They go hurry up to the line of scrimmage. Okay, so that was a called play, Cade said, for the red zone. So they went tempo in the red zone, and very first play, they ran a very base play. He said it was that rollout where he had the option to go to Lachey or Vanderzee. Hits Vanderzee, perfect throw, perfect catch, sliding catch in the end zone, touchdown Iowa. I mean, that's – I want to say that's like super creative, but that's a little bit of a change, Scott, from the previous offensive coordinator where it was just painful down there. And it was like you're barely getting the play in. You got the first and goal. What are we going to run? Play clock's under 5. Hand off 1 yard. Now it's second and goal at the 6. Can't run it, right? So 2 passes, probably both short of the goal line.
No question.
And field goal. So it was just a little departure. That's all I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying that Iowa's red zone issues are solved, but it was a little something to grab onto if you're an Iowa fan. Like, hey, this is a little bit different.
I know. It's throwing the ball in the end zone. What a novel concept, It's like, and I think the worst called game I've ever seen when it comes to red zone was Illinois 2 years ago. I mean, you have the best player on the field, and this includes NFL first rounders and Devin Witherspoon and everything. You still have the best player on the field in Sam Laporta. And all they did was go straight back. They give you the ball at the 4. Well, let's go backwards, not forwards. It's like
There was like a penalty in there too, wasn't there? Wasn't there?
There was like a Bo Stevens, I think, got like a personal foul or something.
Yeah, it was a big one. I remember that.
But there were a couple of different situations.
Ended up kicking like a 45-yard field goal.
It was like they go from Patton to trench warfare, It's like, what are you doing, And remember, and I mean, a microcosm, and this is just they once missed 10 straight 2-point conversions.
Yeah.
Those are things you have in your back pocket. Those aren't things that you're going, well, where did it go? That's kind of where it is. So I liked what I saw out of that, and I liked the passing concept. I mean, both Lachey and Vanderzee were open if they wanted to throw short of the goal line, but I know Cade was sitting there going, I remember Scott keeping those stats. Let's go ahead and do this and throw it in the end zone, and it really worked well because, if I had to see another field goal at that point, Chad, I would have reached for some Steeple Ridge bourbon because I haven't drank any bourbon for a while. So, I had one ready, man. I had it right behind. So,
yeah, you got a bottle right from.
I did.
There it is.
Yeah,
folks.
I did. From Iowa Everywhere, Steeple Ridge. I would have downed some of it. Yeah, I'd have been smarter than my last time.
Yeah, Steeple Ridge absolutely delivers a high-quality, delicious drinking, award-winning craft bourbon. There it is. Good job, Aiden. If you don't find Steeple Ridge at your favorite retailer, ask for it by name. It is distilled, aged, and bottled in Iowa by Lonely Oak Distillery. And I've noticed they've been retweeting me lately, so I gotta stay on their good terms. I appreciate that. And we appreciate their sponsorship of Legends and Listeners. And hey, we said it's NFL week, so no better time to kind of stock up the old liquor cabinet with some Steeple Ridge. You got a lot of games this week, Scott. Thursday, Friday, Sunday, Monday. So big week of NFL. So where'd we end up? We end up a push there. Did we wimp out on a push there?
I pushed. I'm sorry. I just had to wimp out, whatever. I have 3-1-1 out of those.
3-1-1 Iowa, right? So we both I did pick Iowa. I picked Iowa State in the preseason, but for all the factors I itemized, I did pick Iowa to win by 5. So I've got them covering the spread and going over actually. So I'm looking for some points. I had 22-17.
22-17. Okay, I've got Iowa 20-13.
Same as last year. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I also think there's a potential for it to go up for Iowa. Last year it was 17. It was 17-0 at one point last year with Iowa, and they just completely shut down offensively. Mm-hmm. I think if Iowa can extend that a little bit, it could be more in their favor because of the issues that Iowa State's facing.
Yeah, Cade missed like a 90-yard touchdown pass to Seth Anderson in that game too. I remember.
Mm-hmm.
No Seth Anderson this week, by the way.
Yeah.
What? Anything else on Iowa State here? We're going to get into a few Big Ten games.
Oh, I'm good, man. I think
we've been an hour already. So.
Yeah.
Great game. Great week of Big Ten. Obviously, I did. We're both doing. It sounds like we're both doing CBS stories. I did, Hawks on CBS this week. First game on CBS at Kinnick since '85, Iowa, Michigan. Iowa State's first game on CBS since the 1971 Sun Bowl. This is a historic, only their second ever. So this is kind of a notable entry into the Big Ten world for CBS. I'm glad they picked Iowa State. I'm really glad they did. That's going to be cool. I think that's going to add a little juice to the game, Scott. I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having it on a linear network is a big deal. And that's why the Big Ten pushed for this. And it was the third pick of the week, but it was a really good third pick of the week. I mean, you have Texas, Michigan, which is number 1 in any week. And then, Colorado with Dion and Nebraska and, going to NBC at night. That's going to be a big ratings draw. And this one, it usually is too. This one usually gets in the 3 to 4 million range. And it's really a solid number. It does a solid number every year beyond Iowa. I don't know what SEC games opposite of it. I haven't looked yet on ABC, but I like being here, and I think it's, again, start hearing that music, the intro music, which I think is the coolest in college football. I always wondered how many weddings went on, wedding parties were announced in the South, like, kind of like Sirius was to all the weddings in the 90s for us old dudes, you'd have the Chicago Bulls theme, and now the best man,
Yeah.
I'm sure they did the same for the SEC on CBS.
I'm just looking at the listings, but like Baylor and Utah on Fox during the Iowa. I mean, I feel like Iowa State has a chance to outdraw that. Notre Dame is on ESPN, or I'm sorry, NBC at that same window. So, the big game of the day really though is Texas Michigan, top 10 matchup on Fox, 11 a.m. This is what the Big Ten had in mind, right, Scott? You get 4 back-to-back games. You got Texas, Michigan, Iowa State, Colorado, Nebraska, and then even at 9 o'clock on Peacock. It's a pretty interesting game. Boise State and Oregon. What jumps out to you from that awesome TV lineup on Saturday?
No, the whole lineup does. I mean, this is what they wanted, and this is what they got, which is Big Ten round the clock. And now that they've got games on the West Coast, then they can go after dark. Whether it's Boise and Oregon or Utah State minus Petrus, who's hurt, dang it, against USC, but this is what it's about, and even BTN, they get one of their 2 Ohio State games, so they're happy about that. They play Western Michigan at night, but Texas Michigan is one of those games that really stands out. I mean, it's now you're talking about SEC versus Big Ten. It's at the Big House. 2 teams that were in the playoff last year. Texas was a completion away from joining Michigan in the championship game. And, and Texas is a 7.5-point favorite on the road, and Michigan didn't play real well the other day. Defensively, they did as much, but, they won by 30-10, but it was also fool's gold. They got a pick 6 late and when Fresno was driving. So, that one, and then the love fest in Lincoln between Dion and Matt Rule. I mean, that's gonna be fire, man.
That's gonna be fun. It's too bad I'll be. I don't know if I'll finish up by the time that game's over, but that'll be on in the press box, I guess.
I hope so.
While I'm writing, it better be Weitzel. So the other SEC games at 2:30. I looked it up here, Scott. We've got Auburn and Cal on ESPN2, and South Carolina, Kentucky on ABC. So those are your 2:30 games on ESPN. So really, Iowa could be the highest rated game in that slot. Maybe. I don't know if they outdraw Notre Dame or not.
Yeah, maybe. I think it depends on how the game's going. It's kind of. I think there's enough game. Baylor, Utah. Who knows? That could be high scoring. That's actually a really good matchup. Although Utah's better. Iowa State will carry some weight. Just because of the Iowa factor.
It should be a good game. I mean, that's what you want to see a good game in that slot. So
absolutely. And then a couple others that stand out to me, Chad. Kansas at Illinois. Kansas is a 5.5-point favorite. They rolled over Illinois last year, and I kind of wonder what Illinois is going to do. Are they going to be able to bounce back? And then we get our first Big Ten game. Michigan State at Maryland.
Brian Ferentz.
Yeah. Playing against the mighty Spartans. So
a couple teams on Iowa's schedule. So
yeah, exactly. So this is one you should probably DVR and then my Fighting Leathernecks play Friday night against Indiana. So that's even more important.
And Friday night also for your viewing pleasure. On the lake, right? Duke at Northwestern at Lanny and Sharon Martin Stadium there on the lakefront in Evanston. So get your first look at that, makeshift
Yeah.
Big Ten stadium. But I'm not laughing. It looks kind of cool, actually.
Yeah. So we watch that one or Green Bay, Philadelphia. That's going to be a challenge.
God, I got to renew my Peacock subscription. I canceled it after the Iowa women's basketball season, but I'm gonna have to fire it back up, Scott.
Exactly.
I think last thought on that, the whole schedule is I think Nebraska takes care of business. I think they're going to be pretty good this year against Colorado, and I think that's a game. I feel like that's a Matt Rule, like we've arrived type of game. We'll see. Maybe Deion's got something up his sleeve, but I wasn't super impressed with Colorado against North Dakota State. They got two awesome players, like really good players. But I think Nebraska's pretty good too.
Yeah. Yeah, this has kind of a classic, probably like 34-24 kind of feel to it.
I'll go Huskers to cover.
Yeah, Huskers to cover on that just because, Shedeur Sanders and obviously Travis Hunter is as good as there is in any player in the country. And but they're going to break free for some scores. I mean, they're good enough that they can do that against most teams. But yeah, I think Nebraska's too deep. Last year they got thumped over there, and that didn't sit real well with the faithful there. So we'll see. There's still a rivalry between these two.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Hey, we covered it all we covered the Big Ten too this week. So it's our longest pod ever, but why not on Cy-Hawk Week?
Exactly. Certainly worth it, Chad.
All right. Thanks, buddy. For Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow, Legends and Listeners. Comes back at you every Thursday morning during football season here from the Channel Seed Studios and only on the Iowa Everywhere Network.